Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 158. Is it?
I believe so.
Welcome to episode 158 of Let's Talk Assassin's Creed. We are talking about Isu, or potentially we're not talking about Isu. Declan, tell us what our topic is.
So, the topic for today's episode is essentially, should Assassin's Creed move away from the Isu storylines that they've been trying to tell? It's a very controversial topic because a lot of people will be happy they'll get rid of the Isu storylines, and some people might not. So we have a guest on this week to help us unravel this topic. Welcome back, Ru.
Hello. How is everyone
Welcome, Ru.
doing today?
I'm warm for once. So I want to start this episode off with a question for both you, Ru, and James, if that's okay.
Please do.
Alrighty.
So the question is, do you think we've had too many Isu storylines in the last 3 games?
Go on, Ru.
Valhalla, yes. Odyssey and Origins, no.
I'm interested that you immediately separated Valhalla and Odyssey because there's a fair bit of First Civilization stuff in Odyssey, and there's a lot in Valhalla. But actually, Till, before we dive into that, I'm trying to think what there is in Origins other than the ancient mechanism and the big site far to the south in the desert, and of course, a couple of apples of Eden. Is there any other First Civilization stuff in Origins?
The vault in Siwa that shows the big map of the world is that one, and then I counted the DLCs as part of the Isu kind of stuff because there is Curse of the Pharaohs in that as well that does kind of focus a bit on what the apple does, I guess, in a sense.
But Odyssey and Valhalla definitely go all in.
Definitely.
On Isu. So tell us why you kind of separated out those two games.
Okay, I separated them because I feel like Odyssey and Origins, they have a more balanced approach to how they tell the Isu stories. So it's kind of interwoven with the lore of the game. So there's kind of like the running theme of, Cassandra with the Isu. It was predetermined she was going to be the keeper, which kind of makes sense of why she's having run-ins with these mythical creatures in order to get the pieces of Eden to seal Atlantis to get the stuff. That story, it's contained, it makes kind of sense, and it's balanced in terms of mirroring the conflict in the game as well, of you've got Athens v Sparta, human versus Isu. So it's a lot more balanced than, Valhalla. The dozens of pieces of Eden that Eivor just stumbles across and says nothing about.
Yeah, I think Valhalla's difficult because until the Irish DLC, only one piece of Eden is canon, the rest aren't. So it's odd that they're in the game when they're not actually canon and shouldn't be there, if that makes sense.
And there's also kind of the thing of, with Valhalla, I moderately have a bit of beef with the kind of design of, I guess, the Isu worlds. Obviously, we're seeing it through Eivor's eyes, but I feel like there's a little too much Viking fantasy myth rather than kind of the Isu myth that we would expect to see. And then even on top of the Viking myth, feels like kind of like a fantasy kind of gamified version of like Asgard and like Jotunheim. They don't feel like real places. They feel way skewed towards a Viking fantasy idea of what these places look like. So once again, it's kind of that matter of the balance I feel is missing regarding the Isu and human kind of assassins versus Templars story in Valhalla.
I can
there was
understand
also
that.
was there one or two? Well, there was two expansions that were pure, you know,
Your
First
Isu.
Civilization content, which was Dawn of Ragnarok and Forgotten Saga.
Mm.
You know, you were in a
And
simulation inside a simulation, or were you reliving memories that Ava had suppressed?
Yeah,
I forget how many layers of the onion you have to peel now to to get through to the real story. But
I will be honest. I did not play. Was it the Forgotten Myths that was kind of like the roguelite?
mm,
Yeah, I didn't play that
no, me neither.
because at that point I was feeling just a bit too much burnout of the Isu in Valhalla, of kind of it wasn't making sense. There was all of this Isu content, and yet it felt like we didn't get that much out of it.
Mm,
Kind of it felt more Norse myth rather than the Isu or like, you know, Ubisoft's interpretation. And even then, the Norse myth presented in Valhalla isn't entirely accurate, I suppose. You know, Baldur doesn't die like that in the myth, but he dies like that in the game.
at that point, you've mentioned the word that will get Declan going. Come on, Declan, here we go. Tell us all about Baldur and the real the real Norse.
Oh my goodness. When I played that, right, this is at the point of me playing Dawn of Ragnarok that I had switched to Cecile's voice acting for like playing kind of Abel as Harvey. And although I was like, this doesn't make sense, right? This is not what happened to Baldur. Just the way that Cecile's voice acting was going, I was like, you know what? She has me convinced. I was like, this is how it happened.
I do briefly want to say though that I think I do agree with you, Ru. There is too much Isu burnout, but I do think Forgotten Saga is actually the best Isu lore the game has in the series since the Asgard and Jotunheim arc, with the issue that it's behind a myth filter, but what it's trying to tell is potentially the best Isu lore, because there's moments where Thor tells Odin, you know, the enemies are gathering at the gates, which, you know, is a very clear sign of a civil war, which is what Ragnarok is meant to be, not what Dawn of Ragnarok tells us it is. It's meant to be a war of giants. So the idea of a civil war coming makes sense. You know, the Isu resurrecting the dead makes sense. You know, another method to cheat the flare would be, can you bring a body back from the dead? You know, that whole kind of made sense, but it's too many myth filters.
Yeah. And the one thing that I do, I guess, know about the Forgotten Myths is obviously because it's a roguelite and it's kind of like got that cyclical pattern. I was like, oh, that makes sense in terms of like, you know, the reincarnations, how that's all working. You know, the whole thing of this has happened, like happened before, it will happen again. That kind of idea I liked, but I wish it wasn't behind so much myth filter. If we'd gotten kind of the Forgotten Myths DLC in the style of how Atlantis appeared in the Odyssey DLCs, of that mix between Isu architecture and Norse architecture, I feel like that balance would have made probably Forgotten Myths that more appealing to me, because I was getting burnout with kind of these odd pseudo interpretations of the Norse myth and all that. I do like at least that Thor's a redhead. That was a plus.
So, James, what is your thoughts on all the Isu? Have they done too much Isu in the last 3 games?
You've asked a very direct question, and I'll give you a short and direct answer: yes. I think overall they're more interesting when they're more enigmatic. And the more stories you tell and the more you bring them to the surface, you lose that mystery. And I suppose as a kind of, if you step back a little bit from the game by game or the expansion by expansion story, the whole purpose of all the work the Templars are doing is to find these lost artifacts, these lost pieces of Eden. And there's been other projects like the Phoenix Project to reconstitute the DNA strands of the First Civilization. And there's so much, if you like, being quote unquote learned about the First Civilization. Ultimately, it feels like Abstergo's mission will be complete very soon, and they'll know everything they need to know, and then you've got the end of your story. So, without that, you need a certain amount of unknown information and unknown history and missing artifacts to keep the franchise going, to keep the plot going, to keep the Assassins versus Templars, struggle going. And it definitely feels like there's been so much content. And I suppose you can absolutely make a fair point that realistically, what are they learning? Maybe not so much. But I think it also comes back to sort of step out of the universe for a minute. Hopefully Mirage will bring this. I'm guessing it will. I'm just really looking for something a little more real. I don't want to be heavy inside a simulation that was created by another Isu, endlessly dying and learning new skills and whatever. I don't want to change into a raven that flies across this. Is it Svartalfheim? I forget which realm Dawn of Ragnarok takes place in. I haven't played it. I just want to be an assassin with a hidden blade and a cool hood in a city somewhere, stabbing some bad guys or bad girls. So it's the more you go into the First Civilization, and because they keep telling the First Civilization stories through these mythological veils. That means they can't even show us the real, quote unquote, real world of the Isu. Imagine if you could walk around an Isu city like we see in the Hidden Truth video from AC2 with Adam and Eve. Now that would be interesting. The real Isu with no veil, no interpretation, the actual world. Or honestly, just give me a city to walk through and some roofs to run over the top of.
All I'm saying is give me a game where it's like you've got the modern day, and then I guess you kind of in the Animus exploring the Isu era. All I'm saying, I will write this game. I will write it. I will. Want a modern day game and then an Isu era game so badly.
I would love an all modern day game. Imagine parkouring through them. Imagine like Watch Dogs Legion kind of city, but of course with the movement system of Assassin's Creed. That story, that would be amazing.
I'm perhaps biased if I wrote a short plot of one that is a modern game set in Melbourne where we follow Elijah Miles. Because he was in Australia, and I'm just like, what if I just move you just a little bit down to the city that I know the most?
Now, what went on? Let's take a little segue here. What was the story? This was where Juno was defeated in Australia, was she not?
Yes.
Okay.
So Juno was defeated, and Elijah just ends up in the middle of the outback, which, I mean, if he can survive the Isu, he can survive out there, right? It might be warm, but the lad's sorted. And the idea was, through somehow means involving a very good music playlist that I made, he ends up in Melbourne being under the care of the assassins there as they try to figure out what exactly is this child? Who is this child? Why did he just appear in the middle of nowhere?
Now, we had Jodie, Sarah's on the show a couple of episodes ago. We've got you on the show today. So the Melbourne Brotherhood is strong. We know that.
Yeah.
Elijah will be well cared for. The Australian Brotherhood is thriving.
Yep. His dad was a barista, and now Elijah. No, his dad was a bartender, and now he's
Yep.
going to be a barista.
Yeah. I will also just say I was listening. This is off topic, Declan. We'll get back to the issue in a minute. I was listening to a radio show a few days ago, and they were talking about spiders, and it was recorded in Australia. And actually, Australian spiders, of course, terrifying, but they actually don't kill as many people as you think.
They actually kind of kill.
Say again,
It's the type of fangs that they've got. They don't puncture as deeply. Anyway, I'll leave the spider talk. No one wants to hear the spider talk.
No, let's not talk about huntsman spiders.
Back to the Isu.
Back to the Isu, yes, back to the First Civilization. So I just think the mystery is more interesting, like when you see that message at the end of Assassin's Creed 2, you get the glimpses in the hidden videos. I think that's a nice way of showing you that there was something that came before, and they left behind relics, very advanced technology, a few hidden cities, quote unquote temples.
I think like one of the coolest things about kind of like the world building of AC is you've got obviously the kind of like the pre-established factions of assassins and Templars that did exist in like, you know, our history, the player's history. You know, there was the Hashashin, and then obviously the Knights Templar. Those guys are real. They existed. And then you've got this kind of First Civilization that seems to just perfectly slot in as a balance between those two factions. And as you said, they've left behind all of these objects, these temples, kind of like, and we don't know what they are. And it feels very reminiscent of when, in our real world, we stumble across an archaeological find where we're like, hey, what is that? And there's that mystery behind it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, this gets onto a point that I have had quite a thought about.
Oh, no, wait, Declan, hold that thought. We've got to turn the question back to you. What do you think about the recent games and the different types of content, and in particular, Isu content?
We're holding a little microphone to you. What's your thoughts?
We're shining a bright light in your eyes. Tell us.
Well,
interrogation.
I was hoping to dodge this question.
I know you were, but we are not letting you get away that easily.
I kind of love it. I'm here for it. I'm 100% want more of it, because I'm a type of fan who's been annoyed at Ubisoft for showing us that truth video, for then showing us sages and just doing nothing with it. Like, it got to the point where we were playing Syndicate and I was like, where's the sages? Where's the apple? You know, where's more truth stuff? It's like, have you forgotten about the Isu? And then Origins was like, all right, yeah, a game where they've forgotten the Isu again until the DLC. And then Odyssey, it was like, oh, this is cool. You know, this is what I've been waiting for since Assassin's Creed 2. Great.
So the Lydia Fry bit of Syndicate didn't scratch that itch for you?
I didn't know it existed.
Oh, no.
Because I didn't have Wi-Fi a lot, so a lot of the times I didn't have a community to talk to till I started the podcast.
Good point.
So I missed all of these things because after I did the rifts in Unity, I didn't enjoy them. So when I saw the rift in Syndicate, I just thought it was pointless, so I ignored it. Because I had nobody to tell me what it was, I just left it till I found it out.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it before, but I'll say it again. That Lydia Fry sequence is one of my most favourite sequences.
So good.
As a self-contained, what is it, 6 memories? It only takes a couple of hours to complete, but I think it's fantastic. Anyway.
I love that one. in like Syndicate with like kind of the hints of the Isu. That and then although it's not explicitly the Isu doing it, and I have my own thoughts about who it is, I love the Spring-Heeled Jack memory and like the ghost stories.
Yes.
Because I'm like, you know what, you could easily sprinkle some little Isu in there, or perhaps, who knows, a very bored, just a mortal woman who just thought, wouldn't it be funny to just, goof around with these assassins, let them chase their tails.
So you've reminded me of something about Valhalla with what you've said there, Ru. So before Valhalla was released, and especially before the add-on content, we'll come to that in a sec, it's always been the case that most of the Isu, except for a handful of individuals, died 77,000 years ago?
75,000 years?
Something like that. Anyway, yeah. So most of them died. A few survived the apocalypse and the war and everything. And then in Valhalla, it seems that there are Isu coming out of our ears that survived.
They're just everywhere.
Balder did. Well, I mean, again, I want to get back to you on this point, Mr. Declan. You can't avoid this. So Balder did survive because his consciousness was uploaded somewhere, or did he? What does consciousness even mean?
He did survive.
Okay, but what in the Norse myth? If we forget Assassin's Creed and we just go and read the Norse sagas, what was his ending of his life?
Wasn't it he ate mistletoe? I think he was killed by mistletoe.
Yeah, so he died because of his brother, who was blind. As a celebration for every creature on the planet, promising not to harm Balder except mistletoe because his mum thought mistletoe was too weak. When Loki found that out, he gave his Balder's brother an arrow or a knife, I can't remember, with mistletoe onto it. So everyone was throwing like knives, swords, and everything at Balder to prove he was immortal, except for Balder's brother, who was blind and tricked by Loki, who shot him with a mistletoe arrow, and thus killing Balder.
Okay, so if we were to transpose that into the Assassin's Creed storytelling, Balder would have died long before Ragnarok, long before.
Yeah.
Well, not long before, but certainly before the eruption and the solar flare and all that jazz. Okay.
And then it's like, respectfully, why is Alethea how she is in Valhalla? I have written that in my notes, and it just says, why did Alethea do that? Given the lore of the Isu, what she gets up to in Valhalla, little sense.
Expand on this point, please, because I can't actually remember what she does.
Okay, so in Odyssey, she makes it pretty clear that she is against the Isu, right? She is not having Juno's experiments in Atlantis. She doesn't like the fact that the Isu kind of like puppeteer humans and all that. And then in Valhalla, it's kind of like, oh yeah, she puppeteered Cassandra and Layla for thousands of years to get back to her husband, who is planning on doing some scheming against humans.
I think.
So if I wanted Isu, I didn't want it like that. What the hell?
I kind of interpreted it in the wrong way, that Alethea is proving a point that Minerva tried to make, that eventually the humans will mimic the Isu because we're one and the same. So maybe Alethea realized that she doesn't want to puppeteer humans, she's against it, but as you've seen with humans, an end justifies the means, that she wants to live again. So maybe she realized that she doesn't want to puppeteer them so that they're cleaning her house or digging up her blooming flower gardens. Maybe she realized that this is different. She's not putting them into slave labor. She's giving them free will, just directing them to a goal. if that makes sense.
I have kind of like the thought. I feel like she's puppeteering Basim, so it's kind of like it's like a triple betrayal, I guess.
That would make sense.
He thinks that he's the one in charge, but she's actually puppeteering him to reach her goals. And I'm like, Alethea, bestie, what are your goals? Tell me. What are your goals, wishes, and manifestations?
I think the answer to that is war.
Yeah. I mean, I thought honestly with the way that she tells Cassandra, go and find all of these pieces of Eden, her like plans are just she wants a bunch of shiny trinkets.
Smoke.
Do you guys want an extra apple of Eden? I've got 800. I've got a ball pit of them.
You know, this reminds me of what you said earlier on. The amount of First Civilization gear that Eivor collects on her journey across Norway, England,
Yes.
Francia, Ireland, Vinland. Oh, my word.
My friend, she drew a very excellent artwork. She is at Stealing Potatoes on.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know that name, yeah.
She made that artwork of Cassandra with the ball pit of Eden, with all of, and then she's juggling the apples of Eden, and I'm like, I feel like that would be Eivor as well, right?
Yes.
If they just go to Ravensthorpe, if the assassins end up in Ravensthorpe and Mirage, Basim's going to be like, yes, this is the pit where Eivor kept all of her pieces of Eden because she bloody lost it. And just started collecting some shiny orbs because, you know, Raven collecting things, shiny.
But I think that's where the lore gets really inconsistent, because thanks to one of the transmedia novels, we know canonically the only item she ever had on her at once was Excalibur. She'd apparently
the Queen of England. Checkmate, Alfred.
Pretty much. I know it's a bit of a tangent, but the novel does specifically say that there is a plausibility that Eivor could become Queen of England, because the paganism people are getting repressed by. So a pagan woman, because that's what we probably see in Vikings, holding a sword of Excalibur would have literally bent the knee to her.
Yeah. I think I've said it a few times that in my game I had gotten Excalibur and then did a quest where you meet Alfred, but it's not like the original meeting. But I'm just imagining just the shock on that poor man's face when this woman who has just been tormenting his armies rocks up with the sword that will proclaim the leader of this country as he is desperately trying to make England a thing. And it's just like, yeah, mate, sorry. It's fine. They're besties. In my mind, they both understand the toils of leadership. It's just how it be.
I think there's definitely, well, in a lot of ways, all of these pieces of Eden can just be ignored and never mentioned again.
Yeah.
But I suppose if you're a bit creative, they are future items that, you know, Templars might wish to retrieve, and therefore assassins might wish to retrieve.
In Brewster's lab in Syndicate, so he has the Apple of Eden, and then if you kind of poke around the lab, it's from the head of Saint Denis. Like, he has the lamp in his laboratory, which means somehow that got from France to him. And I'm like, are we just going to gloss over that? Was that an Easter egg, or was that kind of meant to be something more?
Foreshadowing.
Well, I was like, why do you have that, mate? And then he just blows up his lab. Or Evie does it.
Evie does a very thorough job.
Girl boss behavior. That is the favorite introduction where they're just like, he's like, oh, don't worry about the train I derailed. You blew up a lab. And I'm like, typical sibling banter. It's like,
And then Jacob just goes, sort of shrugs his shoulders and goes, I killed my target. Doesn't matter what collateral damage I caused. I killed my target.
And it's always my favorite thing of how between the two of them, Evie is meant to be the level-headed one. And about 2 seconds after blowing up a lab with a piece of Eden, she's like, let's go and take over London.
Forget Crawley.
They share the brain cell.
Off they go.
Off to torment the Templars, as it should be.
Yeah. Which is, again, a little off topic, but if you like the Fry twins, if you enjoyed that period of Assassin's Creed storytelling, Henry, Jacob, Evie, George, Westhouse, and all the rest of it, there are some nice little references and sort of crossovers in the new Resurrection Plot novel, which is out in a few months' time.
Yeah.
So.
I was going to say, is this you plugging the books? I felt like it was going to be.
I guess we are kind of plugging the book. I mean, we have no shares in Aconite books, but we got to read them. We got early access, and they're excellent and definitely a must-read for any Syndicate fan.
Non-sponsored, we endorse these books.
Absolutely non-sponsored. Correct.
Very good.
Correct. So Declan, about 10 minutes ago, we were asking you if there was too much Isu content, and I think you said no, you want more.
Yeah, I'm an idiot.
No. I'm interested. So, do you want more? Like, let's think how they've tried to tell the story. So, we've had hidden truth videos. We've had almost like coded messages and so on. We have explored, the Isu world through the mythological veil, like Fate of Atlantis, like Jotunheim, and the other region I can't remember the name of. Do you want more of that, or do you want to go all into a real genetic memory exploration, or do you just want to hear more of their stories through collectibles or notes or things like that?
So I don't know how to word it, but I actually want more stories of the Isu clashing with modern society. So a game idea that I would plug here shamelessly would be the assassins find a man who starts a cult in an Isu temple about the children of Cain, and they then capture him, interrogate him to what he knows. They find a memory disk drive from what Ezio uses for Altair, and then they discover like the genetic memory of someone who was there when Cain killed Abel. And it gives us that backstory to how was Cain the first Templar. I don't want them to go back into like full Isu society, but I want impacts of the Isu afterwards, because we humans are storytellers. So every story we've ever told has a root in the Isu. Can we not go back to that era, back through a genetic memory to a time where the world is just wasteland, society's crumbling, Cain kills Abel, and the Templar ideology is born? That's the sort of Isu lore I want them to now visit.
I kid you not, when you said the Isu clashing with modern society, my mind immediately went to just Basim in Mirage. Maybe he's trying to just figure out how the hell a computer works. That's him clashing with modern society. He's trying to send a text to William.
I think
he's trying to send a text to William. Alethea is in his phone. That's her vessel now.
Oh my word!
I think
she's even Nokia.
They can't destroy it now. I think the reason why I want a clash with modern day is, have you guys ever heard people talk about a cycle, that everything's just on a cycle repeating?
Yeah.
What if that's actually happening? Because we know in human history there was a cataclysm that killed the dinosaurs, and then in Isu lore there was a second cataclysm that killed the Isu. Then there was a third that nearly killed the humans, but Desmond jumped in. Then another was coming, but now Lily and Reed are trying to discover how to stop them. So what if everything is on a cycle and Alethea wants to rebuild the Isu on Earth, so a new Isu cycle?
Can that woman just calm down then? Like a chill pill woman. It's just like, damn, she really just like lost Cassandra and then just lost her freaking marbles.
That's why she's stockpiling. She's going to give them to every Tom, Dick, and Harry and just start an Isu rebellion.
No, it wasn't the opposite way around. It wasn't like, Alethea keeping Cassandra company for 2,500 years. It was Cassandra keeping Alethea company because she was just really sad about being like just in the ethereal grey for so long that she's just been like scheming and plotting and being like, yes, I need pieces of Eden. And then she's like, oh, actually, you know what? Being in this woman's brain, traumatizing, but it's fun. I like that note in the like Isle of Skye DLC where it's just like, oh yeah, Alethea's memory was well accompanied by Cassandra, and I'm just like, what did you mean by that? That memory would be tormented. That woman has so many layers of trauma. She is more of an onion than Shrek.
True.
Yes.
So, I wanted to touch on something James said, and it's something that I slightly disagree with the community, so I apologise. And that is, did the last two games, Odyssey and Valhalla, really ruin the mystery of the Isu?
I would say no. And I have notes about this that I took. Because there is just still so much that we don't know about the Isu, right? So we might know that they have temples and their names and the fact that Atlantis was a thing. But it's like, I don't know if you can remember, there's an artwork of the Grand Temple. It was like an early concept of it. And it shows almost like a laboratory environment that is very similar to what a human kind of like science lab looks like. And nowhere in the lore is it explained, I guess, how this works. And there's all of these little tidbits everywhere of we might know what these things are, but we don't know what they do. And I feel like that kind of mirrors kind of how we interpret a lot of archaeology of, yeah, well, we have these things, but we don't know exactly what they're for sometimes. And I feel like that gets mirrored with the Isu as well, of, we've got all this lore and that, but even, all these mainline games later, we still don't know what they're up to.
I agree, and I think it's as well, like, as I've heard a complaint a lot of times, all our Isu lore is war orientated. It's always civil war between humans and the Isu, or as we see with the Truth video, and it's what I argued before the DLC, when Harvey and everyone stood with weapons, that's not the human Isu war. I think that's an actual civil war between two Isus. But where's the sensible stuff? Like, what music did they listen to? What books did they read? I want a game where they pick up an Isu pencil and argue if it was a knife, and it just turns out it's a pencil.
Where is the Isu pottery fragments?
Exactly.
I request them now. Where are the shards and the sherds? Where are they?
Exactly. And as we've seen, the temples have been preserved for all these years, so we know the materials that Isu used can survive weathering, degradation, everything. And even Greek pottery in real time can survive this time. I'm pretty sure they had like a tablet that could have survived that, you could do a little.
from what we see, kind of like the Isu architecture, I don't know if it's been said in the lore, and if it is, someone please tell me what that stone that a lot of Isu structures are built with, that kind of like that really dark, almost like obsidian like stone, whatever that is, it's clear that that is a very hardy material. All of these temples that literally have the weight of the earth bearing down upon them appear in pretty good condition. So it'd be kind of like easy to say that a lot of their stoneware would be made out of this same material. A lot of their objects and kind of personal items would have been made out of this, the same way that humans now make things out of like metal and plastic. This stone seems like the plastic of the Isu era. It seems like it lasts a long time. So why don't we have more of, I guess, the smaller items that would have been preserved rather than just swords and shiny apples?
And I think that's what the biggest problem with that these last games have, in a way, ruined the mystery of war, of what the war between the Isus were. But they've not ruined the mystery behind the Isu because they've not really told us anything we don't know. You know, we know the sages, so we know there had to be more than one way to cheat death if Juno's husband wasn't the correct way. So there has to be more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like, I guess it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe like there's that certain melancholy of the Isu, of they're a civilization that was so powerful that they built all of these temples, these artifacts that last to this day. You know, you've got the energy lattice that covers the entire planet, and yet in an instant they were gone. So there is that mystery of this super advanced civilization just being completely, like, almost wiped out off the face of the earth, and us only having tidbits to go on to try and piece together how this entire civilization fell. Because we have civilizations in history that fell, and there is still that kind of element of mystery behind them. If you think, how could something this powerful collapse? But it could be anything from, you know, climate to famine to a political, you know, kind of a rocky political landscape to, you know, a solar flare. There's all of this stuff that it's like, did that happen to the Isu as well? You know, did the Isu have neighborly squabbles like we have today?
Or, sorry, or a theory I had, dead end evolution, that the Isu got so scientifically advanced that they didn't need to evolve. They didn't need to become hardy against the harshest winters because they could just build an AC. And the lore does tell us that there was another species, a lesser species that existed alongside the Isu, that we humans were built by combining that DNA with Isu DNA. What's to say that that species could keep evolving like we did, and the Isu just stopped evolving, so they couldn't survive what came next because they just can't evolve. They've just stopped being creatures.
Yeah, and it's like the whole mystery with the Isu, I suppose, is, as I've said before, of we don't know everything, and it's the same with like our history today. We will never know everything about, say, ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, because there is simply things that were just lost to time. So that's why I'm kind of fine, I guess, with there being some gaps in the lore of the Isu, because it makes it a bit more realistic, of being like, yeah, we might know what happened, like, no, might not know what happened at this exact date in history, just because we've lost all the records from the Isu period. And even then with an animus, what's to say that having a memory going back that far, the memory might become like a little bit distorted by time?
James, what are your thoughts?
Your question earlier was, I think it was, have we kind of lost some of the mystery? And I guess I kind of answered that with my very first answer, which is, I think, yes. What can I add to that? Not much. I think if there is going to be more First Civilization content, I would rather drop the mythological veil and just let us see the cities. Let us meet the people. Let's learn more about them directly through genetic memories rather than a Greek cultural version or a Norse cultural version. Yeah. I want to stab some Templars, man. I don't want to spend time in Svartalfheim or Jotunheim or Atlantis anymore.
I definitely feel like with Mirage, if there is going to be like the Isu content, which I feel like there will be just because of like the nature of Basim being a sage, I definitely feel like maybe that might be more of like the background, because we're kind of seeing him kind of come into his own both as an assassin and as a sage. So I feel like Mirage might have a more balanced approach in kind of how the Isu is portrayed, rather than kind of with Eivor, it kind of felt like she kind of just snapped in to being Odin a little bit. Obviously, because we don't have like the background of, hey, what was she up to from the ages of 9 to 25? Stabbing is the answer. When exactly did Odin show up? So when we see Eivor, she's already kind of got him as a secondary conscience. But with Basim, it seems like we're seeing him before that. So kind of that progression of the Isu is definitely going to feel a lot more natural, rather than kind of like that jolt into it. And maybe Basim will do a little less mushrooms to try and figure out who he is.
Yeah. It's all about that gin in the trailer, isn't it? What is that?
Less mushrooms, less mushrooms.
Indeed. Yeah. It's all about the gin. What is the gin? What is the nature of the gin? What does it represent? How does it surface? I'm looking forward to Mirage, I must say. I'm looking forward to it a lot. And I'm looking forward to it because I suppose we've had a number of different ways of telling the First Civilization story, and I suppose I'm looking to see what they do. I mean, it was intended to be, initially considered as an expansion. And of course, that's changed a lot.
The thing that I feel like with Mirage is it does feel like a coming of age story. Not so much in the like High School Musical Grease kind of way, but in a little bit of kind of Basim becoming Loki, becoming, I guess, like, quote unquote, his true, identity. It does feel like a kind of like coming of age of he's coming into his own as an assassin, he's coming into his own as a sage, right? There is definitely going to be more of that, I guess, natural progression of, I don't have a better way to put it other than Basim going through Isu puberty.
Oh, I can't wait to see that wiki article. Isu puberty is a phase that many sages go through. Yeah.
That's why Eivor was just losing her marbles the entirety of the game.
Yeah.
Right. She was just going through it, and honestly, I respect it. It sucks. I can't wait, if it truly is Basim coming into his own, we're just gonna get like, I don't know, Basim trying to be all like really intense and like, size up a Templar, and then he just gets a massive voice crack.
Oh my god, that would be so funny. Basim's voice breaking, bless him.
Yep. He's trying to like argue with Rasan, being like, yeah, I'm an assassin.
Oh dear.
Listen, I love him. He's great.
it's funny, right? I don't. My feelings to him are kind of ambivalent.
Yeah.
I'm neither. I'm interested for the game. I'm interested to see his story, but more as like this is not meant to be harsh, not at all. But more as like an observer than someone who's heavily invested in his life story and his character.
I can only describe him, I guess, in a very Gen Z way.
Please do. Teach the boomers.
In which Basim truly is my sad little meow meow man. He is like Joel of The Last of Us. He is the baby girl. He can do nothing wrong. I don't care if he did. I will defend that man. I'm just like, all right, you do you, mate.
Oh my god! I heard someone describe Joel. Where was I watching it? As a sympathetic bastard.
Yeah.
And I thought that's brilliant. And I wonder if that applies to Basim as well. Like, he may end up doing some fairly unpleasant things, but we kind of sympathise with him.
Yep. As much as he was out here bloody quoting Shakespeare on top of Avor's grave like a bastard, I feel like I just want, like, deep down, maybe like in a modern segment of Mirage, for him to feel somewhat of like guilt of what he did to Eivor, of like not only kind of, I guess, I feel like he was the reason why she turned away from Ravensthorpe in the end. As much as I don't like the ending of that DLC, I guess it's just what it is. Of him feeling like, I guess, guilty of her leaving Ravensthorpe, her leaving behind everything, and then him reliving her memories. I want him to feel guilt for what he has done. I want him to feel bad for it, and I want him to grow as a person. Develop, man.
This is the wrong time to say that. I'm only wanting to play Mirage because of the Jin. That's just it. I want to know what it is.
I remember when we were at the Forward, because it was around 4 a.m. in Australia, and we were all sitting there and we were watching it, and this Jin comes on screen, and my sleep-deprived self, I was like, what is that?
I saw the Jin, and I think I literally was like, cool, Mirage is going to be good, I'll enjoy this. The Jin appears, I was like, oh my god, grab my notepad, I got theories, I'm off.
Oh, that was me, both when like Rasan appeared on screen, I was like, yes! And then when the title for Hexe appeared on screen, and myself that took German in Year 9, I was like, I know exactly what that means.
What does it translate into directly?
So Hexe translates to witch.
Okay.
Which is kind of like what started people being like, oh my god, is it German witch trials?
Gotcha.
And then somehow I managed to convince my teacher in uni to let me write about Hexe for an assignment. I was living it up.
So, I have one last question for us to discuss.
Yeah.
And it's actually the reason why I brought this topic up, and then because of a certain book. But should we go back to Assassins vs Templars with Isu in the background?
Yes.
I will also say yes.
Conversely, I will say yes and no.
And no, pick a side. Come on.
Hear me out.
In the words of the keeper, it is balance.
Right.
Let me pull out my staff.
The reason why I'm saying yes and no is the resurrection plot, the book, showed me that maybe it's actually a good idea for an Assassin vs Templar story without Isu interference. And that's the kicker. I do want Assassin vs Templar story. That's why I'm saying yes. I miss them. But I actually am curious to have one without an Isu crux. That's what they're balancing on. Because Syndicate is a great story, but a lot of times I don't see the point of the Piece of Eden being in there except for the shroud. At times, I just don't see the point, because what Starrick is doing is multi-level control. That in itself warrants assassins to try and find balance, if that makes sense.
I definitely get the idea of the shroud being kind of like a plot point in Syndicate, because it's obviously like you've got London, Starrick controls London, so the Templars control London, but that also means that the Templars control the British Empire, and the British Empire is currently controlling a majority of the world. So if you have a Piece of Eden, that means that your soldiers, that are off, in India, in all of these countries, doing such cruel acts, and you give them a shroud that means that they can't die, you have just taken your empire from, it's the British Empire, to, it's the British Empire. Of this is something that can't be stopped. So I guess it's that stakes that the Piece of Eden brings to it.
Yeah.
Without the Piece of Eden, you still have an incredibly powerful empire doing cruelty all over the world. And then you add in the shroud, and it just gets 100 times worse than what it already is.
But then it brings up the question that I've had since Rogue, weirdly enough. Can Assassin's Creed not hunt Templars without there need to be an Isu involved? Because every story revolves around the Isu. Like, Shay defects from the Assassins because of what they did with the trying to get in a Piece of Eden artifact. So the question then is, would Shay have defected if the Assassins did something that had no correlation to hurting innocents over a Piece of Eden? It's like, can we not have one where the Assassins want to stop the Templars not because the stakes are high, because they're going to get a sword or an apple, but because what they're doing is just wrong?
I feel like definitely kind of with that, the Piece of Edens do serve more as like a game device.
Yeah.
Of kind of like motivating the player themselves. But then also with, like, obviously there would be Assassins fighting Templars without like the kind of knowledge of a Piece of Eden, because we have, I forget what they are called in Revelation, where you can send the Assassins off to do stuff. I feel like they're called contract.
Yeah, something like, it's like the Brotherhood mini game, isn't it? But yeah, what
The
are they
Brotherhood
actually called?
minigame.
Contracts or something? I can't remember.
I know that there's the ones in Revelations, because you can send like assassins to like Athens to deal with the apparent temple, like the Isu temple that's under the Parthenon or something. I don't remember if that's an exact detail or if I read it in a fan fiction somewhere. It happened. But it's like, there's obviously assassins who are fighting Templars without the need of an Isu influence or kind of like item at the end of it to serve as the reward. I feel like it's obviously part of gameplay reasons that we get the assassins fighting the Templars for the Piece of Eden, just because it makes for a more interesting story and higher stakes involved.
I think I may just be a little bit unrealistic. I mean, like, I don't know if James will agree, because Unity is his favourite, but I love Unity, but sometimes I'm just like, Unity is great as an Assassin's Creed story. It doesn't need like an Apple of Eden or a Piece of Eden stake, because there is enough at stake there,
Yeah. I really like how Unity balanced kind of like the Isu and the Templars versus Assassin conflict of, there was the Sword of Eden that kind of like Arno did get in the end, and then the Dead Kings DLC, we've got the Head of Saint Denis. So there is elements of the Isu in there kind of like pushing the story forward, but I wrote in my notes that the Isu work better as a side dish than the main course.
I love that.
I love that as well.
They're like a little bit of seasoning you sprinkle on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also next to this, it does say the Isu are snacks, but we'll just leave that how it is.
That has a different meaning, doesn't it, amongst the Gen
It has a
Zers?
different meaning.
Yeah.
I should just written next to it, Basim only. The snackers.
Do you know, when you were talking about Unity a moment ago, Declan, the question I was turning over in my mind and trying to think through is, which game has the least amount of First Civilization content? And does that make for a better game, a worse game, or just a different game?
I
I
actually
feel like the earlier games, definitely.
Say again, sorry.
The earlier games? So,
Mm,
like AC1, you've obviously got the apple that you get at the
yes.
start, but then you don't actually see what the apple does until literally right at the end of the game.
yeah.
And I will stand by it that there's the whole thing of like at the time when that ending came out, people were like, what the hell is this? This feels like a garbage ending to a game. And then when you go back and replay it now, you realize how like baller of a marketing move that was to kind of like reveal this secret other civilization right at the end of your game, and then to kind of be like, hey, if you want to figure out what that is, it's sequel time, baby.
And I'm not saying it because it's I'm not saying it because it was a game that started my journey, but I think AC1 is the best for less Isu because the story is very gripping. You know, Altair's journey for redemption, taking down the Templars that are just pure corrupt. There's a lot of philosophy. And as you say, that ending with the apple, AC has not topped that twist, in my opinion. That is like the top tier twist in the franchise.
It's definitely like that of that ending with kind of like, and we don't get much context behind it, but I will always love the ending of AC2 of kind of Ezio being in the temple and he is just begging for an answer of just being like, what is this? What are you? What am I seeing? Because, oh my gosh, I wish we got that out of Eivor. I just wanted her to just, like, lose her marbles just a little bit and just, like, let it out and just be like, what is this? What am I? What am I seeing? Why is Odin's fate so much more important than mine is? Of just, like, that direct questioning of the Isu. I need it. I'm going to start writing the fan fiction of that ending. So welcome to Ru's fanfic corner.
Do you not think that actually we might get that thing in Mirage? Because a lot of the culture around the Jin that I read, a lot of time they do see it as like a possession by another spirit. So Basim could question Loki a lot, you know, have that moment where he just does not understand, and it's not a moment of acceptance, like Ava accepts Odin, so she goes off, but it's a mutual understanding that he's just doesn't understand what the hell is going on, doesn't understand why he's been possessed. He just has to go with it and figure it out and grow.
And I feel like that's one of like the really great things of, I guess, how it's been presented so far, of how Eivor deals with kind of like her Isu side rather than like Basim. Of we see Eivor and she is the sage of like a religion that she has been raised in. Like this is her faith. She was probably raised from birth to believe in the Norse gods. While there is like Basim, he's kind of entirely removed from Norse culture. That isn't his faith. And then there's like the tidbit where Basim says that he spent days upon days reading in the House of Wisdom. So he kind of has more of like the philosophical mindset of the Isu, whereas Eivor kind of seems to have more of like the practical kind of mindset. And that way that they kind of like deal with the Isu, I guess, like perfectly encapsulates the sides of the Isu that we have, of the more philosophical kind of like ideas of the Isu being mirrored with the philosophical ideas of the Assassin and Templars compared to the practical Isu and the practical actions of the Assassins and the Templars. So I feel like the Isu kind of serve as that middle ground between those two factions of like, they are the ones that started it all, and thousands of years down the line, they are still kind of inspiring and setting the standards for these two factions that consider themselves so different.
I've still got this idea for a very talented artist, Ru. I don't know if you know any. Of a puppeteer.
I don't know, I have to call around.
A puppeteer who is an Isu, and they've got two marionettes, one in each hand, and one's an assassin and one's a Templar, and they're just dancing to the moves that have been set out by the Isu 77,000 years before.
Someone, I don't have their name off the top of my head, but I will send it to you afterwards.
Oh,
and
please.
if we can, attach it in the show notes.
Yes, happily.
An artist did like a very good artwork for Codex Toba of kind of judo being that puppeteer, and it is such a visually striking piece. I am just in love with it. Let me just see real quick. I might have their name on hand.
Please do.
We'll
talk amongst ourselves while you look it up.
Yes. talk.
Declan, which game has the least amount of First Civilization content?
None.
It probably is AC1 because, like Ru said, you see the apples effect right at the end, and then you fight Al Mualim for control of it, and then it's over.
I think that's where AC1's the strongest, because in my opinion, I don't mean disrespect the franchise, so I apologise, but I think Assassin's Creed 1 was the last true decent Assassin's Creed game, in the idea that it taught you the most about the fundamentals between both sides. Altair's philosophy taught you a lot, whereas a lot of the games afterwards did, a lot of twists on Apple of Eden, people's own personal feelings. I'm trying to find how to word it, but I strongly believe Assassin's Creed 1, you could mirror that type of story and do an Assassin vs Templar story where the main problem isn't about an apple or a sword, it's about the fact of you've done wrong. The Templars, maybe like Syndicate would have been a good one, that a story about the Shroud, but the Assassins let the Templars in, and now they have to fight for control to try and free London, because if the Templars control London, they control the world, as it's stated. So what if an assassin failure let them get a foothold and they have to fix their own mistake? There is potential for an Assassin First Templar story without the Isu, but do they have the courage to tell it? I think that's the question.
If they don't, I will write it.
Well, in my I don't mean to plug my fanfic, so I apologise, but in my Freddie Weatherall fanfic, I did the idea that London got corrupted by the Assassins, not the Templars first. That Assassins got a little bit immature, like what they do with Masaev when Altair leaves. And it's, that mistake where the Assassins, got a bit too controlling. They fell, and in that void, the Templars just took over because no one was willing to step up.
Yeah. I kind of like...
Sorry, go on.
I kind of really want to see, I wrote about it for my kind of newsletter, because it was the piece that I wrote for university, of what kind of game could Hexe be. And I kind of didn't touch all that much on the Isu, because it's kind of, for the witch trials, you wouldn't need the Isu to be a sign of witchcraft, because even just, in that time, having a hair out of place meant you were a witch. So kind of with Hexe, I feel like that could be the opportunity to tell a story without the Isu. It is simply a game where, the Templars could win, right? It isn't a game with a happy ending where the assassins come out victorious. Because it is a game where, just due to the nature of the witch trials and who the Templars are with their religious ideology, they would win. They would have the upper hand in every situation. They could easily say the assassins are simply a cult of witches. And bam, you've got rid of your problem.
So I don't know if this is
really excited for Hexay.
I don't know if this would be a respectful story for them to tell then. So could Hexay be the first attempt of an Assassin's Creed purge? That the Templars have managed to get enough control that they're going to purge the assassins, like what they did with the sleeper agents. Or I don't know much about that law.
I definitely kind of like touched on that and kind of just like obviously like trigger warning of like lynching imagery. But I did write in my piece that kind of like obviously one of the main ways like methods of execution was hanging, and it would be kind of like very clear that the Templars would use that because it is kind of like that visual of people would see it and they would know this type of person. They're people that dress in robes, right? They wear a blade on their wrist. They are missing their ring finger on their left hand. There's all of those iconographies that the Templars would be able to so easily exploit in that kind of time of mistrust that you wouldn't even need the Isu to be a part of the story in order to highlight how detrimental the situation is.
That's spooky. Because they could easily have a public cry or demand that why hide their face if they've got nothing? If they've got nothing to fear, so why the hiding?
Yeah,
they could call out on the methods of like hiding in plain sight. Maybe they got witchcraft that helps them hide in plain sight.
And I even kind of like put it in that piece of the way that kind of like the tenets would kind of be so exemplified in that time of you need to hide in plain sight. You need to stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent, or else you will be accused of of being a witch. You can't compromise the Brotherhood, or else you put your Brotherhood at risk of being one of the accused.
Oh, this would be so good if it is.
Without if you building on what you've just said, Ru, if you had Hexay with no First Civilization, and it's purely over time Templars have kind of built up a society to distrust these strange people with their robes and their missing finger. Instead of having a game where, like most of the games, have got a piece of Eden that you are pursuing, whether it's to find it or to stop it falling into the wrong hands or to retrieve it or whatever. Most of the games are using, pieces of Eden as the MacGuffins. If you strip that away, you could really create a fantastic game where it's about an individual's survival. And it's almost like a very selfish, that's the wrong word. Well, maybe it is the right word. It's like a story focused just on the individual that you're playing as and surviving.
Yeah.
There's no outside motivation. You're not there to find, an apple or a shroud or a blade or a sword or any of that crap. It's just you and the world that you're facing. And that could be fascinating. That could be really engaging.
And definitely kind of like the idea of, obviously, the pieces of Eden are used as kind of like tools of control, both with the Templars, the Assassins, and originally the Isu. Each faction wants the piece of Eden, like the pieces of Eden, because they help control people. As much as it's like the whole thing of, Templars are control, Assassins are chaos. Assassins are just as much Templars that Templars are assassins. But that's getting into a whole different podcast topic. But kind of that idea of you wouldn't even need a piece of Eden to control the population because you have just built up that element of fear.
Yeah.
And fear controls better than any piece of Eden could.
I'm thinking very much like Plague Tale Innocent sort of vibe. Stealth, a lot less
Plague Tale,
combat
Plague Tale.
oriented.
Gothic horror.
Yeah, and it
Yes.
I know Gothic period is different to the period of time that Hexay set in, but you know what I mean.
Mm.
I don't know much about the German witch trials, so I'm just thinking of the British ones. But when you mentioned the missing ring finger, I remember in school that if people had birthmarks during the British witch trials, they always linked that with, that's a witch. So thinking about the ring finger, it's known in law that they eventually dropped it after a while. This could be like a little hint to another reason they dropped it. Some dropped it because they knew that they were found out. At some point, people may have kept it as tradition. And this is kind of reason why now they actually realise that maybe they should not keep this tradition. It's too damaging. It breaks the third tenet of do not compromise the brotherhood.
Yeah, and I think I touched on that as well in my piece of like, they would stop kind of like the finger sacrifice kind of earlier than what we see it in the games, just because it is such a visual identifier. And I also wrote kind of like, I think the line was, in order to hide, we now wear the robes and emblems of our enemies. You would have assassins, but they would be wearing Templar robes, and they, instead of having a missing, dropped my mic. Instead of having, I got really excited. Instead of having a missing ring finger, they would be wearing a Templar ring on that finger as kind of a way to kind of hide in society. They would have to adopt the visual iconography of the people that they have been fighting for centuries in order to stay alive and stay safe. And like you said, James, it's that element of doing anything to survive this world that is so against you.
The thing that
I'm
trying to
really
think
excited for Hexay.
If we go with that idea of Hexay, because if that's the idea, I think I would play it on repeat a lot. How would, in that situation, would they not be able to break the second tenet? Because if one town crier can conjure an entire village against the temple assassins using fear, assassins will never know who is their enemy and who is their friend. How can you stave the blade from the innocent when the innocent want to kill you? Are they truly innocent then? And that's an interesting philosophical debate of what makes a civilian an innocent. If they if an innocent is willing to kill, torture, and bribe an assassin and get him into Templar control, are they truly an innocent?
Yeah. And there's kind of like the whole thing of the assassins themselves aren't innocent in their conflict. In the sort of kind of like philosophical conflict that they have, there isn't an innocent party. So it's kind of like, okay, so stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent, which means you don't kill civilians, you wouldn't kill Templars, and you wouldn't kill assassins. Because each to their own, they're innocent, but then to you, they could be guilty. And that's kind of like that whole idea of the witch trials. And once again, the whole reason why you wouldn't need the Isu to have that sort of influence in that game.
Can I just point out one thing, James?
Yes, mate.
Did Darby secretly hint at this being an idea? Because in one of our conversations with him, he said there is no clean break in history for assassins to be Templars. Well, assassins or Templars. And the German witch trials, using what Ru said, you can definitely argue the point then that there is no clear break in that system of Templars and assassins, because if civilians are turned against assassins, they're not Templars, they're still civilians, but their actions could be Templar in nature.
Yeah, I just think of, I don't know if any of you guys have watched MASH.
What, you mean the US, was it drama or comedy from the 70s?
Yeah.
No, I've never watched it, Ru.
Okay, so there is an episode, and it just sticks with me, and I think it is called The Interview. And one of the characters gets asked, "Are you a soldier?" And he says, "No, I'm a misplaced civilian in uniform." And I feel like that perfectly kind of encapsulates that whole thing of, you know, the assassins, the Templars, and people of neither faction. At the end of the day, they are just civilians that have just been put in a uniform.
This is pretty interesting. So it's definitely possible then for Assassin's Creed going forward, especially with Infinity, to not weigh too heavily on Templar, well, Isu ideologies or Isu artifacts, but there is still room in the franchise to grow the Isu lore, but maybe we don't need every game in a trilogy about it. So it could be Red, have a bit of Isu lore, Hexe, no Isu lore. So a nice fleshed out break.
Yeah, and I've got here kind of like in my notes of with Infinity of it's kind of the thing that I have with, I guess, like Star Wars and Marvel at the moment of there kind of feels like there is this need to tell every story that makes up your world. And maybe we need to blame Tolkien for that, of insisting that every single piece of your world's lore is covered, right? It is set in stone. And I feel like Infinity kind of could bring up that problem of, does every single minute of Assassin's Creed lore need to be solidified? Or can there be room for the fan interpretation and the fan conversations that kind of keep fandoms kind of going and alive? You know, it's been like, nearly 3 years since we got a new Assassin's Creed game, if we don't count the DLCs of like Valhalla. And yet the community is still going with theories of what could be. So kind of with Infinity and kind of going forward, do we need to tell all of the story? Or can we just hint to a story and let fans do the rest?
That's an interesting point, and I could see that. I still believe, and I know I could be wrong, that Infinity should bring a multiverse into Assassin's Creed where everything is a simulation and fan creativity can become canon material. So if fans wanted to write stories where there's no assassins, no pieces of Eden, just assassins versus Templars at war, it would be a canon simulation. It's not canon to the games or the canonical lore, but it is canon to the simulations of the franchise. I'm old, I know.
I definitely think that with kind of like fan stories, I guess it's because I've been writing fan fiction since I was like 13. I used to write a lot of Marvel fan fiction, and now kind of like onto like AC and the Deep Dark lore. I used to write Voltron fan fiction, exposing myself there. But there is obviously, I feel like fan media is so important to kind of all media. You need to have that room for fans to have their own interpretation of a story. But I don't think, like you were saying, Declan, it has to be canon for it to be a legitimate kind of piece of fan work, right? The best like stories that I have ever read were written by like 17-year-olds who were writing these absolute epics of fan fiction on their lunch breaks in high school. So kind of like, it's the whole thing. Some of the best stories come from the most unexpected sources. And although they're not, I guess, canon, they should still be kind of like put on that same level of what canon can be. Because they're just as equally important, because they're all stories that we're telling them about, the characters that we love. I may be saying this to defend the fact that I have written around 200,000 words on one fan fiction.
Wow.
That's fine.
That's pretty cool. I know I've said too much and people are annoyed at me for this, but I think Assassin's Creed is a very unique franchise with the whole idea of simulations being possibility to tell a multiverse without going into parallel dimensions, but keeping simulations. That there is so much stories in Assassin's Creed that actually fans should be able to promote and have an effect on the franchise, but not be it canon in a way of it happened, it's concrete, but canon in a way of it's recognized that this story exists in the universe, because there is so many theories, so many characters that may not have backstories that could meld into the franchise, that Assassin's Creed could use its fans to flesh out its world in the most unique and diverse setting possible.
I definitely think with that, of maybe it's just me, I do have a little bit of multiverse burnout, mostly just from Marvel. Of it's kind of like, everyone's got a multiverse now. Fun!
But
there's like that multiverse burnout. But in terms of like fan stories existing in the canon universe, if you want to get meta about it, right? So in Valhalla, right, there is emails confirming that in 2020, in the Assassin's Creed universe, COVID happens. Right? So that's canon in the Assassin's Creed universe. It happened just as it happened in our universe. So that implies that fanfiction.net, Archive of Our Own, and Wattpad technically all exist in the Assassin's Creed universe.
Yes.
So technically, our fanfictions exist in Assassin's Creed.
Okay, that's how we're ending the episode. Our fanfic exists in a meta Assassin's Creed. That's it. End the episode on that bombshell.
Archive of Our Own is canon in the AC universe, and someone, I request, write fanfiction of the modern AC characters reading fanfiction of their ancient ancestors, because that is just a giant circle of hell all on its own.
Okay, that needs to be. Imagine Jacob just reading all his fanfics. Cassandra.
Jacob seeing the Wrath in him tag on Archive of Our Own, and he just gets a chill down his spine.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, so there you go. There's AC Infinity for you, Archive of Our Own.
Yes.
So I think that's all we've got time for tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. So thank you again for joining, Ru. It was great to have you.
Thank you for having me on again.
And I think we've all learned that Assassin's Creed is diverse, crazy, and most importantly, fanfics are meta in the Assassin's Creed. And I'm going to defend that now. That is the highlight of the show. It's not about the Isu or what we discussed. It's fanfic is meta in Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. The things we learnt today. Balance is important when telling a story.
Yep.
Hexe is shaping up to be the best game in the series, despite the fact we know nothing about it. And Archive of Our Own is real.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, everyone. It's been great.
That's been a good conversation. I've enjoyed it.
And if you want to weigh in your options, and I may actually ask James for help on this, to put that little outro of Ru as a clip for us to share for a while. If you guys have your opinions and would like to offer your thoughts, you can email us at assassinscreedletstalk@gmail.com, reach out through Twitter at ACLetsTalk, or check in the comments below on YouTube for our Discord link, and you can come chill with us in Discord and hear all our meta theories on fanfic, fan art, and my crazy theory about unicorns, probably.
Yeah. Come to the Discord and hear me chat about the world design of Assassin's Creed
That was a good
and,
conversation.
and
That was.
defend the movie to my last breath.
And that was great to read as well. Yeah. I look forward to your essays. Your fan fiction, great, but I quite like your essay style analysis of this franchise would be good as well.
When I get all academic.
So thanks everybody, and we'll see you all next time.
See you soon.
See you all.